Can Narendra Modi's India dial it back? While the visiting U.S. President Donald Trump was hailing the Prime Minister as a defender of religious freedom, Tuesday on the other side of the Capitol, lynch mobs were gearing up for a third night of rioting, the worst Delhi seen in decades. What had started Sunday as clashes over the Hindu nationalist government's new citizenship law has since turned into a full-blown anti-Muslim rampage, with police accused of standing idle, opposition parties calling for the resignation of Modi's right-hand man, hardline Home Secretary Amit Shah. We'll be measuring the government's response so far and ask how the world's largest democracy can prevent repeats of the intercommunal rampages that left so many dead in Delhi in 1984, Uttar Pradesh and Mumbai in 92, and the home state of then-Governor Modi in Gujarat in 2002. Today in the France 24 debate, we're looking at New Delhi's riots. With us from the Indian capital, human rights activist Navsharam Singh of Karwan-e-Mohabbat, or Caravan of Love. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
We're also pleased to welcome BJP member Rajat Sethi to the show. How are you?
Thank you. I'm very good.
Reporter Nupur Tiwari, the founder of Smashboard, is with us as well. Thanks for joining us. And always a pleasure to welcome back Jean-Luc Racine, senior researcher at the Asia Center think tank, the France 24 debate on Facebook and Twitter. The hashtag is F24debate. Yet with the death toll rising to at least 24, we've heard this Wednesday appeals for calm in the capital from across the political spectrum. Earlier, correspondent Surabhi Tandon reported.
So what we see here are remainders of what used to be a giant tire market. But 2 days ago, when violent clashes broke out in New Delhi, this entire area, which is run and owned by Muslims, was set on fire by a giant frenzied mob. In fact, even as we speak, firefighters are putting out the last of the fumes. Now, we were able to speak with Muhammad Naeem, who owned a few shops here, and he told us about how he lost everything in the incident.
I don't know who they were, but they were chanting slogans of the Hindu gods Ram and Shiva. I didn't recognize them. They were strangers, not locals. And then I had to run away to save my life.
This has been the worst riot that Delhi has experienced in decades. Violence between both sides led to the loss of property and life in Muslim and Hindu neighborhoods, and the anger is palpable everywhere.
Relations between Hindus and Muslims will never be the same again. Only the government can do something now. Otherwise, this sort of situation might erupt again.
It's the Muslims who attacked us. We only defended ourselves. There's a billion of us. If we attacked, we could finish them off entirely.
What remains a fact, however, is that the majority of violence occurred in Muslim-dominated areas. This mosque was burning till earlier this morning. Locals say even the imam was killed during the ensuing violence.
The police are on the side of the Hindus. They throw stones at us, and the police do the same. When our MP tried to call the Delhi police chief for help, no one answered him. As a result, our mosque was burnt down and people were beaten up.
The state and central authorities have been severely criticized for not deploying enough troops to curb the violence early on. However, since last evening, paramilitary forces have swung into action and managed to control the most violent of rioting. But in an area where Hindu and Muslim neighborhoods are so close to each other, the atmosphere continues to remain extremely tense.
Navsharan Singh, members of your group have been to the affected areas. Tell us what you've seen the last couple of days.
For the last, not only couple of days, but last 3 or 4 days, we had been seeing tension rising up. And we actually, very sorry to say that we saw this coming. We were seeing that there were riotous mobs, which were reported to be doing the rounds in the areas where sit-ins by women activists and other people, civilians in Muslim majority areas were happening against the CAA, or the Citizenship Amendment Act. And it's been going on for the last 2 months. But for the last 3 to 4 days, the atmosphere had been totally there was a lot of tension in the area.
What's brought it to a head now?
Sorry?
What's brought it to a head now in the capital?
Oh, that's what I was coming to, that there were inflammatory speeches which were being made and threats being made by people, certain people actually who belong to the party in power, who came to these areas closer to where the sit-ins were happening in number of areas in the city, and openly threatened. They said that they would want to vacate these areas. They were not going to depend on the police. They were not going to wait for any court decisions, but they were going to come and vacate the areas through force once Mr. Trump leaves the city. And that's something which was openly threatening people. And so that's why we think that things which have been happening, the sit-ins which have been happening in the city for the last 2 months, very peacefully, suddenly there was a lot of venom which was spewed against people who were sitting in these peaceful protests, and they were openly threatened while the police in the cities sat mutely, saw these very, very vulgar ways of actually approaching, threatening, and then the violence broke out. And we knew why, and we could see it coming.
All right, the connection there dropping out a little bit. Apologies for that. Now, this Wednesday, we've had politicians appealing for calm, and we've had India's national security advisor touring areas of the capital hit by the rioting. Again, Ajit Doval, that's his name, echoing those calls for calm.
All the communities are cooperating. There is no need for fear. We've deployed enough security forces. They are alert, and the police is doing its job with complete diligence.
All right, there he's standing by the police. Rajat Sethi, we heard both in the report we showed and from Navsharam Singh a moment ago that police stood by while a lot of this happened.
Well, it seems like what Navsharan is missing is a different side of the story. And since she did not allude to it, it will be my responsibility to allude to the other side as well. Number one, the police in Delhi is a responsible, citizen-friendly police. For the past 3 months, the protests have been going around, and the police did not come in and disturb the protesters. A. B, we need to remember that the police, when this entire radical Islamist groups came into the streets, they did not go out shooting. Instead, police people who were manning these streets were actually shot. There was another police head constable who was shot dead, and there was an intelligence bureau official in the same localities where the violence erupted. He was not just murdered, his body was thrown into a drain by 500 to 600 radical Islamists who had come in baying for his blood.
I'm sorry, radical Islamists? Because we haven't heard about radical Islamists. So
so I think you've not been following some of the finer details of how this protest is being funded. The intelligence officials in India, as well as the government, have opened up the accounts of an organization called the Popular Front of India, who's been funded by certain radical elements outside India to carry out certain protests in the heart of the Indian capital, which is Delhi.
All right,
So that was there, and
Nupur Tiwari, your
even-
thoughts.
even the-
I just want to say
the
that what you've
Communist
just heard
Party-
Rajat Sethi say,
it's just-
and I
it's
hope
a
that he's going
forward
to actually let us have a
perspective.
conversation,
Would
but
you please
because
allow
you
me to
can
finish my
see
point?
that he's.
I'll get back to you,
continuing
Rajat,
here.
in 1 second. I just want
allow-
Nupur's reaction on
What
this.
Rajat has just finished saying is basically a very typical narrative that all members of the BJP, including some of the leaders, have sustained. So when he talks about, this is what deception, deflection, inversion and falsification is all about. He's talking about the Delhi police taking care of Delhi citizens and being a very friendly force. What we have been seeing for months, for weeks, and at least for 2 months now, is that citizens have been attacked by the police. And as a lot of people have captured evidence on camera, circulated it on social media, we can very clearly see policemen standing by, not reacting, watching, complicit, absent or passive. There is video evidence of policemen breaking CCTV camera. There is evidence and reports done by news channels in India where there are piles of burned vehicles found right in a few meters in front of police stations because they have been either shielding or simply been inactive, watching the mobs do their job, which is basically the cleansing of protesters, as it were.
Rajat Sethi?
Wow. Can I please? Well, the protest had been going on pretty peacefully. The police had allowed them. Even then, the protesters had blocked a very important highway in the capital city. You cannot imagine any protesters, forget about being Islamist or
and
otherwise.
Why should the police not allow?
One at a time. Rajat Sethi.
No, you cannot. Let me please finish. Why are you getting agitated? I'm just putting some facts before. The road was being blocked, which is an illegal act in India. The Supreme Court has given observations several times. Still, the road was being blocked in India for the past 3 months, and still there was no punitive actions being taken. What happened was that the radical Islamist elements, there are a few radical Islamists in India who, madam, please keep quiet, let me finish my point. A few radical Islamists saw the opportunity that Donald Trump is visiting India, and it's a good opportunity to make a case out of it. And within the 3 days of Trump's visit in the capital city of Delhi, they thought to utilize this opportunity because the international media would be there. They started capturing several streets, several metro stations in the capital city, which was all absolutely illegal. Still, the police was quiet and they didn't allow the mob to go violent. But the incident triggered when the police people were shot dead. 2 policemen were shot dead. One was an intelligence bureau official as well as one was a head constable.
Sorry, I have to intervene here.
One at a time.
And thereafter, the riots. So that's how the entire thing escalated pretty rapidly in the past 2 days. That's what half of the story is. The other element is the Aam Aadmi Party, which is the left communist party, which is currently ruling New Delhi. An elected official of the Aam Aadmi Party by the name of Mohammad Tahir Hussain, he's been caught with his house is in one of these localities. Men have gone up to the terrace of his house and have started throwing acid bottles and petrol bombs onto the police, which were trying to do.
That sounds like anecdotal evidence there. Let me.
I just want to point out that as far as the Delhi police is concerned, the High Court has today, the court has today said that the police should be registering FIRs. The court has expressed its shock at police inaction. And all of these anecdotes that you're hearing, they are all false. There were crowds that have been shouting slogans.
The policeman was killed on the first day. That is true.
Okay, the police personnel was killed, but what about the 27 people who were killed, the ambulances that couldn't reach hospitals, the people who were dragged, lynched, beaten up, forced to sing the national anthem while they were bleeding, and the the loads and loads of video evidence that citizens have been putting up on social media that's circulating there as evidence. And if names are going to come up, and if Mr. Rajat Sethi is going to talk about names, he should also name the Kapil Mishra, Anurag Thakur, Parvesh Verma, and all these people whose speeches, whose inflammatory speeches were actually heard by the court today.
Let me turn to Jean-Luc Racine here, because this Wednesday has been about trying to tone it down. We've heard appeals for calm, both from the ruling AAP in the capital and from the Prime Minister himself. We could take a look at his tweet in English. Peace and harmony are central to our ethos, says Narendra Modi. I appeal to my brothers and sisters of Delhi to maintain peace and brotherhood at all times. It is important that there is calm and normalcy is restored at the earliest. However, we went on the Twitter account in Hindi, the feed in Hindi earlier. The only tweet to express grief was over a bus crash in Rajasthan that's killed at least 24 there. What do you think of the Prime Minister's messaging through this crisis?
Well, the Prime Minister is known for being, what I could say, a strong messenger. Twitter is one of his deliberate means to pass various messages, and as you underline, it's significant to see the difference between the tweet in Hindi and the tweet in English. And the tweet in English is, of course, for the international community. But beyond that, I think what's happening now, and this very debate itself, is extremely significant, because it does underline how the Indian society is today divided. Anytime there is a protest against the CAA, so the new law, which we may perhaps remind what's the content of the law, the government has decided to facilitate the grant of citizenship to refugees coming from Bangladesh, Pakistan, Afghanistan, if they are Hindus, Sikh, Jain, Christian, but not Muslim. So, of course, quite a number of people were a bit puzzled by this kind of restriction. And what we have seen, and I think it's really an historical point. No one knows what will happen later on. But basically what we have seen is that whatever be the position of the political parties and the opposition, the movement of protest came from the citizens. And still more interesting, the role of Muslim women going to the street peacefully, including with kids, which imply that they were hoping that everything would be fine. By the way, this kind of Muslim protest, peaceful protest in the street, has gone much beyond what was the position of official Muslim clerics. I think about a statement by the Imam of Jama Masjid in Delhi, who started to give government interpretation of the law. So what we see today is that after a viterative campaign for the Delhi election, but it started much before, when you had people, including from the government, or member of parliament, or member from legislative assemblies from various states, from the BJP in power at the central government, in a way, what we have seen during the last 2-3 days, it's the translation in reality of speeches which have been extremely provocative.
On the campaign trail leading up to those Delhi elections, we're going to pick up on that point when we come back. Stay with us. You're watching the France 24 debate. Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's the France 24 debate, and we're looking at how India is trying to tone it down after the worst rioting in decades to hit the capital. Clashes between Hindus and Muslims that have left at least 24 killed. the New Delhi riots. We're talking about him with human rights activist Navsharam Singh, who joins us from Delhi. Also in Delhi is BJP member Rajat Sethi from the ruling party of Prime Minister Modi. Reporter Nupur Tiwari, founder of Smashboard, and Jean-Luc Racine, senior researcher at the Asia Center think tank. We were talking in part one how this has all come to a head the same week that Donald Trump was in India. And just before leaving, the U.S. president was asked at a press conference about the Citizenship Act that Jean-Luc Racine was talking about, and accusations that Narendra Modi was unfairly targeting Muslims.
We did talk about religious freedom, and I will say that the Prime Minister was incredible on what he told me. He wants people to have religious freedom, and very strongly, and he said that in India they have worked very hard to have great and open religious freedom.
Navsharam Singh, your reaction to that?
I think we are not seeing religious freedom anymore in India. We have seen in the past few years actually hostility and hatred towards Muslims. And it is not, I would like to say that what we are seeing in Delhi at the moment is not Hindu-Muslim riots. It's actually targeted violence against Muslims. And it'll be wrong to call it a violence where both communities are participating equally. No, it is not happening. What you asked me earlier, also what I am seeing on the ground while I am in Delhi, I am seeing lynch mobs going about freely, intimidating Muslims, killing Muslims. I'm seeing vigilante groups, and I'm also seeing police just standing by and not doing very much. We saw a BJP party spokesperson coming and making a very provocative speech where a senior cop, is standing next to him. And the cop doesn't say anything to him. This person, who's a senior BJP leader, leaves the spot saying, "We will be back very soon and we will not let you sit here." And we are only waiting for Mr. Trump to leave. And the cop is just standing there, not saying anything. Attention was brought also to a cop who died, and we are really sorry for that to have happened on Delhi streets. But where is the police? The question is, when the cop is killed, where and when there are people who are on the streets brandishing guns, where is Delhi police? Delhi police is not there. And what we've also been seeing, that it is not that all of a sudden these crowds have become very strong. We have seen that very systematically the institutions like the police, which were there to limit the power of these vigilante gangs, the goons, is completely weakened. It's not there.
And let me ask you on that point, Navsharan Singh, we saw in that report at the outset of the show that now we've had in the last 24 hours the beginning of the deployment of paramilitary forces. Does that reassure you?
I mean, it should have been done much before. And we've had previous cases of violence, communal violence in this country, where army and paramilitary were called in actually quite early on when the violence broke out, which had not happened in Delhi. In Delhi, we waited for 3 days. And we are, even today, when everybody in the state is actually saying that, oh, now everything is normal, there's calm, I would like to tell you the citizens, because the police is absent, because the state institutions are not functioning, it is the civil society which has come together to form crisis center. And we are, as we speak, receiving calls from people who are stuck in these areas, calling us constantly. And my colleagues are telling me just an hour before when the show began that it is escalating. It is escalating. It's happening. We are getting constant calls. Please take us to the metro station. Please help us leave our homes and go to a relative's home. We are not feeling safe. We are not safe. safe, we are not secure. So it is not that normalcy has returned. It's the state which is now saying, has decided to broadcast that everything is normal after yesterday's situation where complete mayhem ruled on the streets, where when there was no police to protect any Muslims, when there was no police to protect mosques from being desecrated, when there were women who were crying with their children, calling for help, and nobody was picking up the phones. And that's when, at the middle of the night, civil society people had to knock the door of the High Court of India. And we are grateful for the High Court judge who opened the doors at 11:30, called his colleagues, held a court, passed an order, asked the police, let the ambulances go, because the people were stranded in places where there was no way to do any surgeries, provide medical assistance, and police was blocking the ambulances from plying. It was only after the High Court passed the order at around 1 a.m. or 12:30 that police actually allowed the ambulances to move. The High Court came down so heavily on the police, saying that please do your duty. And that's when some kind of semblance of duty bearing police's role was
returned,
seen.
you say. Let me bring in Nupur Tiwari here.
I just want to put all of what Navsharan has said into perspective a little bit over here. One is that we have to realize that there is a communal bias and an institutional bias that exists. We in India know very well that in Gujarat in 2002, the same pattern was deployed, where the police and the state were actually abdicating their responsibility, leaving the crowds out there in the streets to fend for themselves and to attack people as they wished. Now, this is something which one has to put into perspective and realize that all the optics and platitudes that we are hearing now about calm returning, obviously, after 3 to 4 days of mayhem that's happened in Delhi, where people have been brutally attacked and the police has been watching. This is a pattern that the current government tends to use. They step back, they watch the violence, they let it happen. They call it clashes between pro and anti-CAA protests. Please let me say a few more sentences, François, because I've been waiting for really long. And I want to say that you have to put this into perspective and look at it this way. All the thousands and thousands of people who have been protesting all over India have been waiting for this to happen. When is this going to happen? When will these so-called clashes that are actually only attacks on the minority community, when are they going to happen? And please remember that most of these crowds, Rajat Sethi was saying a while ago that the police has allowed the protest to carry on peacefully. Why should they not allow peaceful protests to happen, number one? And number two, the police, there has been evidence that in December and in January, when there were protests that were called violent protests by anti-CAA citizens, now evidence has emerged that police got into library and started brutally beating students who were just simply studying. So all of these platitudes and all of these excuses about their being calm are all false. Also, please remember that the slogans that the BJP supporters are actually shouting are things like "Goli maro salon ko, desh ke gaddaron ko," shoot those cowards. And they're also now calling everybody, and including me, by the way, after this show, when I go back home, there will be Rajat Sethi's fans and trolls who will be harassing me on Twitter for saying anything against the CAA law and anything against what's happening in India right now.
Let me bring in Rajat Sethi.
Because there is a fear psychosis that is being developed in India.
Let me bring in.
Not allowing somebody like Rajat Sethi to say that there is radical Islamism when people are being prevented from taken to hospital when they've been beaten up. This is unacceptable. These are not clashes, these are not riots between
Nupur, you have an unfair advantage here because it's a Skype connection. So let's let Rajat Sethi speak here.
What Nupur has said is symptomatic of what is wrong with the communists of India. They love name calling.
I'm not a
love
communist.
to, be an ideal victim of sorts when they are essentially the victimizers. Now, let me give you an example. One of their brethren, Mr. Sharzil Imam, who was present at the anti-CAA rally, talks about severing one portion of India and a central portion, which is called the northeast portion.
Let's stay focused on the number of people who have died in Delhi.
One at a time. One at a time.
Interrupt you while you were speaking, madam. Please have the basic courtesy. Because I know lynching voices is the habit of communists worldwide. World has seen enough number
Your
of examples.
supporters are lynching people
One
in
at a
the
time.
streets.
One at a time.
You have murdered millions, ma'am. Your ideology has murdered millions.
Oh,
so, ma'am,
really?
please allow me space, uninterrupted space. This debate is a 4:1 debate. I expect that equal amount of time is given to the contrarian opinion as well, provided you don't lynch my voice on live television, madam. Now, coming to the important point, Sharzil Imam, who was there to sever, who gave a clarion call to the Muslims of India that if 500,000 Muslims come in and take the resolve, they can amputate India and they can actually remove a part of this country from India. Let me tell you, if this thing happens in France, what's going to happen? The French government has banned all the imams to come in who are coming to France territory, French territory, and trying to radicalize Muslims in this country. And rightfully, President Emmanuel Macron took the stand that the imams can't be allowed.
The last 3-4 days.
It realizes the problem behind radical Islamic forces who operate at global scale. So please understand that where the real problem is, the real problem are handful number of radicalists who are trying to sway and trying to create fear psychosis into the gullible minds of the Muslim population of this country. No one, and let me repeat, not even one educated person has been able to explain to the Muslim people when at least 1,000 assurances has been given by none other than the Prime
court
Minister
has
of this
spoken against. The court has spoken against your party. Your party members making inflammatory speeches.
One at a time.
Given, but none of the literate elite communists of this country of India have made even a small gesture to clear the air and let the Muslims feel secure in their homeland. Nobody made that effort because this thing was brewing. They were waiting to cook their over the burning flames of thousands of Muslims. They've been waiting for this.
So the flag.
One at a time. One at a time, please.
I'm sorry, François. I'm not getting enough time here. You have to give me enough time.
You've spoken more than.
No, I haven't. I just have one more thing to say. That if these are radical Islamists, why are they putting the Hindu saffron flags and burning mosques and burning the Quran? There is video footage of mosques being climbed, turrets of mosques being climbed over, and the saffron flag being put there. This is to say that this is radical Islam when there are Muslim people being targeted, their homes are being broken into, and crowds robbing them and burning their shops on the ground.
Let me bring in Jean-Luc Racine here. Jean-Luc, you have several things here. You have the context that Nupur mentioned, which is a recurrence regularly. These sudden flashes. We had 1984. It was in Delhi. It wasn't Muslims, by the way. It was against Sikhs that there was
after the assassination of Indira Gandhi.
After the assassination of Indira Gandhi. Then you had 1992. Then you had 2002. Why does this happen?
Well, it's a bit perhaps too early to put everything in the same basket as far as.
Well, certainly the casualty toll is not the same. Yeah,
the casualty toll is not the same. But the principle might be the same. There is clearly a strategy. Basically, whatever be the name of the BJP, there is a willingness within the party, and not only in the margin of the Hindu nationalist movement or on the Sangh Parivar, that's its in the name, which want really to go further. We have to put all that in the context of the last general election last year, when Narendra Modi came back to power with an enlarged majority. And clearly what we have seen is that after a first stint as Prime Minister, being re-elected with a larger majority, it was quite clear that now what was on the program for a long time, including in the election manifesto of 2019, there was a feeling in the power circle that, well, now we can make it. Now we can scrap Article 370, which were preserving the latest margin of autonomy to Kashmir. We can wait, hopefully, in the Supreme Court judgment for enabling the construction of a temple to Ram on the site of a mosque which has been pulled down by the Sangh Parivar in 1992. And I think...
and there's one more, by the way. There's this talk of a uniform civil code.
Yes, but...
which would do away with laws for religious minorities.
But this is what's interesting. But we could have expected the third point to come, the uniform civil code. But in a way, shrewdly enough, the BJP government changed its tune and brought this law enabling refugees, non-Muslim refugees from the neighborhood to come, because I would say politically shrewdly at the beginning, the argument was why Indian Muslims are just concerned. It doesn't concern them, it's concerned refugees. Why are you opposing us to welcome refugees? So just to put, as it was said by Mr. Steve, that it's just a conspiracy of radical Muslim or the communist or whatever. It's to forget a part of the political game, which is to consolidate the BJP political strength by deciding to put in difficulty the Muslim minority, because beyond the CAA, what is really a matter of concern, which brought people in the street peacefully, was the National Register of Citizens, where Indian citizens could, in the near future, whatever say the Prime Minister who has said that no, it's no more on the agenda, to prove that they are citizens. And the engagement a lot of Muslims, and not only Muslims, because I think what's important is that in the street, it was not Muslim versus Hindu. In the street, you have Muslim, Hindu, Christian, or whatever, protesting against
those who believe in a secular state the way it was established at independence. Navsharan Singh, we're running short on time, and I just want to ask you about, we've also had accounts in the midst of what have been some terrible scenes the last 3 days of people, whatever their religious affiliation, who've been also coming out to help and shelter those who are being attacked.
Yes, very much. We saw many examples where Hindu neighbors came to help their Muslim brethren who were in crisis situation. They tried to send food and provide shelter, but at the same time, we heard and we continue to hear that those Hindu people are also neighbors, are also being intimidated. And at some point, they had to withdraw. There were several news reports that came today where they mentioned that please don't mention our names. Please don't say that we were trying to feed your child because we are also under threat. So even a small gesture of humanitarian gesture of the communities which had always lived together is being threatened. And the issue really is that the authority of the lynch mob, which is completely illegal, but which is seen to be legitimate because it is inspired by the values of the party in power. The police is also standing with them. We are seeing that people are trying to, they've not lost their humanity. We've seen reports of both Hindu families and Muslim families who've lost their dear ones are mourning together, and they are saying that their children have been lost to the hatred. But what we see in this entire episode of the last 3 or 4 days is that there is complete is complete protected with impunity by the state, and we've seen how non-state actors are finding their way into the processes of the state, which is highly dangerous and which
Highly
needs
dangerous.
to
We're
be
gonna have to
brought
end it there. Unfortunately, we're running short on time. Navrasham Singh, I want to thank you so much for joining us from Delhi. I want to thank as well Rajat Sethi for being with us from the Indian capital, Nupur Tiwari, Jean-Luc Racine. Stay with us. Media Watch is next. And we say hello to James Cretan.
Hi, Francois. So just to look at some of the reactions coming up on Twitter, for the most part, to all of the unrest in India. This is an image, I'll start with this one, from a couple of weeks back, well, 16th of February, so about 10 days ago. The Twitter user here calls it a beautiful photo, and indeed it shows a grandmother, ostensibly a Muslim from the Muslim faith, putting her head on the Delhi police officer's beret, and so she's blessing him, if you like. This happened earlier today when a delegation led by daddies met cops and sought permission to march to the Home Minister's residence, who is seen as, Modi's right-hand man, if you like, to meet him. Cops assured them that their request will be taken ahead. So I suppose a touching image of sort of people reaching across those divides, and unfortunately that seems to be very much forgotten in the last 24, 48 hours. This is a story that's got an awful lot of attention. An 85-year-old Muslim woman, Akbari, she was burnt to death after a mob set fire to her house chanting Jai Shri Ram. I am just gutted, says Rana Ayub of the Washington Post, tweeting on that.
Jai Shri Ram, which means?
Jai Shri Ram is basically a slogan. It means praised be the Lord Ram, but it's a slogan which is repeatedly used by Hindu supremacists and especially by mobs, lynch mobs that are out in the streets. In 1992, when the Babri Masjid was brought down, Jai Shri Ram was the slogan. And even now, the inflammatory speeches, Jai Shri Ram is the slogan. And this is a slogan that is very often used by the BJP Hindu nationalists.
Right, so certainly an example there of that slogan being used in a terrible, terrible way. So just to point out that Shaheen Bagh was a place which became symbolic of the movement against the Citizenship Amendments Act, which provides a pathway to citizenship, but it sort of discriminates against Muslims. But it has now moved to other parts of the city as well. Anyway, more comments here. Until Narendra Modi, India was an example of a well-functioning liberal democracy where religions and creeds cohabited in relative peace. His poisonous rhetoric is at work here in these scenes of violence. And Narendra Modi took to social media today with a message that is very much one of peace and harmony, despite past rhetoric. Peace and harmony are central to our ethos. And he went on to make further statements, hoping that peace will be restored. Our fight against the Citizenship Amendment Act continues, writes one Twitter user. Our fight against your fascist regime continues. Our fight for self-respect and dignity continues. So very much the fight, if you like, is kind of being transferred onto social media. And then you have others further down shouting their support for the CAA, which of course has become a sort of a lightning rod for the divisions. India is the biggest secular democracy of the world, is the biggest lie ever told. And you can see images there of a minaret being burnt or torn down, not just one indeed. Now, it's worth pointing out that, of course, it's not a clean division. Here you can see members of the Hindu faith against the CAA. So I think it's fair to say that it's not, completely ethnocentric in terms of the divisions. But we're seeing now there's been a massive amount of protests in other parts of Delhi as well. This is one of the main thoroughfares, I believe, and it's called Occupy Kerala Raj Bhavan. I'm sorry if I don't know exactly where it is, but that hashtag has been used in a bid to rally people and to sort of, occupy that public space in a demonstration of opposition. Now, obviously, lots in the press as well in India, and Amit Shah, the Home Minister, quite a lot of criticism of him for sort of veiled comments that would have almost that were quite permissive to allowing, I suppose, mobs sort of a free rein, if you like. A lot of people very, very angry with remarks he's made in the past.
Yeah, the opposition's been calling for his resignation this Wednesday.
Right, and there's opinion pieces as well going up in the Indian press. This is a piece in the Indian Express where one journalist speaks about Hindutva mobs basically checking her ID and acting as police officers almost, wanting proof that he was a real Hindu. I'll just finish with this comment. What has been going on in India is properly scary. It is genuinely in question whether it can retain its status as the world's largest democracy, while ethno-nationalism is ravaging its social fabric and destroying its institutions.
All right.
Lots of comments like that going on.
Lots of comments on both sides. Many thanks, James Creedon. I want to thank our panel once again. Thank you for joining us here in the France 24 debate.